Hello, this is Jim McKeeth, lead worldwide developer evangelist from Embarcadero Technologies, and welcome to this webinar on From Delphi 2007 to 10 Seattle Easy. In this webinar, we're going to go through some of the business benefits of moving to 10 Seattle and then provide you with some resources that you can use to make the transition easy. Real quick about me, as I said, I'm the lead worldwide developer evangelist, also the host of the podcast at Delphi.org. It's been more of a blog lately than podcast, but hopefully have some more podcast episodes coming soon. I also am in charge of the Embarcadero MVP program, which isn't on here. Longtime software developer, many different platforms. Delphi is still my favorite development programming language. My claim to fame, though, is back in 2000, I actually invented and patented the swipe to unlock. The company I was working for owns that patent now and has assigned it to Samsung. But it's kind of a little excitement a while ago with the whole Samsung Apple lawsuit around the swipe to unlock when it was discovered that my patent had precedence in there. So very cool, exciting. That's my claim to fame. Don't even get Christmas cards from anybody about it, but it's still pretty cool. Real quick, if you're not familiar with Embarcadero Technologies, Embarcadero is developer tools. Now, Embarcadero purchased the developer tools division from Borland. Was previously known as Borland, Enterprise, CodeGear, etc. All of that was bought by Embarcadero Technologies. Previously, Embarcadero Technologies had some database tools, but because of an acquisition from IDE, those database tools have now been moved out of Embarcadero, and they're now part of IDE. And Embarcadero is now completely focused just on developer tools and interbase. So this allows us to be much more focused to get you the things you need as a software developer. Down there along the bottom, you see some logos of some recent case studies we've done with some of our customers. You can find more down there at the link at the bottom, embarcadero.com/products, Rad Studio customers. So, like I said, the agenda, we're going to talk about where Delphi's at today with 10 Seattle, some of the benefits of moving forward from 2007, how to deal with some common roadblocks, and provide you with some resources and help in moving forward. So let's start with a little story or a little metaphor here. So you see we have this ship out to sea, sailing along, powering along, and this ship represents you and your application. Now, you're wanting to move forward with your ship into the future to continue to provide great features for your users. So in the future, we have Delphi 10 Seattle. Now, you don't care to upgrade to Delphi 10 Seattle just because it's the latest version of Delphi. What you are looking for is you're looking for more sales, new features in your application, new platforms, new markets, and most importantly, happy users. So that's what 10 Seattle represents. It represents the ability to move your application forward to improve your sales, really. I mean, if you're in business, that's what it all comes down to, and make your users happy. So what's stopping you from moving forward? Your boat has some anchors on it. These anchors are holding your boat back, preventing you from moving forward to have more sales and happier users. So what our objective here is to look at how we can make it easier to move forward to 10 Seattle, provide some good motivation for you to take advantage of adding some new users, more sales, etc., and get rid of these anchors that are holding you back so that you can move forward to 10 Seattle. So some of the business benefits of 10 Seattle, not technical details, we'll get to those in a little bit, but the business benefits are expanding the reach of your application. The reach is allowing you to reach more users, more platforms, etc. Also, give you better connectivity so that you can connect to more web services, more devices, etc. Also, to improve your productivity with IDE enhancements that make you more productive, and more flexibility in the way that you get things done so that you're able to have more choices in how you solve the problems that are presented to you in making your customers happy. So let's talk about greater reach. 10 Seattle gives you greater reach with international audiences through Unicode. You're able to reach more platforms through OS X, iOS, and Android support. You can reach more memory on Windows with 64-bit support, and you can reach more CPU cores with the new parallel programming library. So Unicode is the new standard for international characters, for all characters. The idea of ANSI or ASCII being plain text is way outdated, and everything now has moved forward into Unicode. Unicode provides access to pretty much every character that you'd want to use through its code points. That includes all the characters you'd want to use for English, emojis, international characters, just tons and tons and tons of characters that you would need in supporting international audiences. So Tin Seattle has support for Unicode in the text editor, in the user interface, and in code, in memory, etc. It is the native way that strings are dealt with. It's all based on UTF-16, but it also has T encoding so that you can read data that's in UTF-8 or ASCII or whatever encoding types you may encounter out there. So this means you can deal with all the data. Wherever the data is coming from, you can deal with it. This is really, really important as the world has become more connected. Databases store data in Unicode. On the internet, most of the data is in Unicode, etc. So it's really important that you have Unicode enabled so that you can be connected to your new audiences. Also, more platforms. So 2007 had .NET and Win32 support, but the world has expanded. The world's moved forward. Microsoft's even kind of moving away from .NET in some regards as well. They have new initiatives they're doing for more native development. So Delphi has expanded to support a number of new platforms. You can now have a single code base, write your application once with FireMonkey, and you're able to reach all these different platforms, both 32-bit and 64-bit Windows. So VCL works on 32-bit and Windows and 64-bit Windows, but FireMonkey works across all these platforms. FireMonkey also has OS X support with 32-bit applications, iOS support, iPhones, iPads with both 32-bit and 64-bit, and Android devices, tablets, etc. I've actually run Delphi applications on so many different Android devices, Android set-top boxes, Android watches, Android Google Glass. If it's an Android device, I try and run Delphi applications on it, and 99% of the time, it works without any trouble at all. All this is done through true native. You're building it down to native applications that run on the native ARM CPU on the device. The new parallel programming library is really a fantastic new feature that's available in Tin Seattle. It was introduced a few versions ago. There's been some updates and enhancements since then, but it allows you to reach all the cores on the systems you're running on. So it's no longer are users using single core, single CPU systems. My laptop has 8 cores, 8 functional cores. Like it's 4 cores with hyperthreading, so it's 8 functional cores, which is just crazy compared to not that many years ago. So the new parallel programming library includes a self-tuning thread pool. And then in that thread pool, you can create a task. And so a task is a unit of work that's not necessarily tied to a thread. So what that means is you can create a whole bunch of tasks and put them in the thread pool. And then the thread pool will take and say, oh, I've got 8 cores, so I can execute this many tasks at once. It'll go out and grab the tasks, executing those so that it's able to do so efficiently. So the difference between a task and a thread is a thread specifically says I am allocating a CPU OS resource of a thread, whereas a task gets executed across this self-tuning thread pool. It also includes a new T-parallel for loop so that you can take a for loop, and if that for loop is not dependent upon previous executions or previous iterations, you can run that for loop parallel across multiple cores, and it will run much faster. Also, the iFuture is a really kind of a cool feature where it's like, I need to at some point in the future get the result of some calculation or some data that takes time. So you declare an iFuture and it goes out in the thread pool. And then later on, when you need it, you go to read it from the iFuture. And if it hasn't finished calculating, it'll block until it finishes calculating. But most of the time, the calculation's done and you pull the data out. And so all of this not only gives you better performance, but it also gives you a more responsive user interface in your application development. So now let's talk about how 10 Seattle gives you complete connectivity. The web services support has been expanded from SOAP to now REST services. Everything's REST services today. There's still some SOAP out there, which is great. Delphi still supports SOAP, but REST is where it's at. Also cloud connectivity, wireless connectivity, and also app tethering and the new HTTP socket library with built-in HTTPS. So Indy's still there. If you love Indy, Indy's great. I like Indy. But we also now have a new socket library that uses the native OS sockets and gives you full HTTPS support automatically. No need to include OpenSSL or anything like that. It's a fantastic new feature. So new REST services library makes it easy to connect to and consume REST services. All the websites out there have REST services, whether it be Dropbox or social media or Google or your Fitbit, whatever it is, they probably have a REST service. So we have this new REST debugger that you can point to a REST service and it will consume that REST service, pull it down and show you the data in there, show you how it works, and you can compose queries and add parameters and then specify OAuth 2 authentication or whatever authentication mechanism they're using and do all this stuff through the REST debugger. And you click a button and it gives you the components already prototyped, ready to go to connect to this. And it will go to this REST service, pull down the data, use the dataset adapter and put it into a memory dataset for you to work with. It is so incredibly powerful and easy to use. The new JSON libraries make it much easier to deal with the JSON that you get through these REST services. Very, very powerful, very powerful. Everybody's talking about the cloud, putting their data in the cloud. We have cloud connectivity that lets you host your data in the cloud, whether it be with Amazon Web Services, Microsoft Windows Azure, or back into the service providers like Kinvi or App42. The Kinvi connectivity is provided out of the box along with Amazon and Azure. App42 is a third party that has provided components that you can install and connect to their services as well. Everything you need for user authentication and data storage is all provided, as well as the ability to do mobile push notifications. Bluetooth is the new standard for wireless connectivity. There's basically two different standards within Bluetooth. There's Bluetooth, or what we call classic Bluetooth, which is what you use when you pair your smartphone with your car, for example, to share your music. And then there's Bluetooth Low Energy, or Bluetooth LE, which is what's used for talking to a lot of the newer devices like heart rate monitors and stuff like that. And this is designed to use very, very little energy. So Delphi 10 Seattle has two Bluetooth components in it. It has a Bluetooth and a Bluetooth LE component. The Bluetooth LE component works with Bluetooth smart gap profiles. For example, like a heart rate monitor, there's a gap profile defined by the Bluetooth consortium that says this is how a heart rate monitor behaves. You can go out to their website, read those specifications, connect to a heart rate monitor, and work with it fairly easily with the Bluetooth component. This works across all the supported platforms. There's a couple caveats on a couple platforms because of the platform provider, but generally speaking, you can connect between all the platforms with Bluetooth. Another great feature is app tethering. It works both over Wi-Fi or whatever networking you're using and Bluetooth. So essentially, you have the idea of a hub application. Now, this could be your existing VCL application, or it could be a new application you developed with FireMonkey, a console application, whatever it is. Any platform, doesn't matter. But once you have one application, and then you create a second application, that we'll call this the companion application. Again, this could be a mobile application that is connecting to your existing desktop application, or it could be two completely new applications. But once you've defined your two applications, then you use app tethering to do auto discovery. So it can automatically discover nearby devices via Bluetooth, or it can discover devices on the same network via Wi-Fi or TCP/IP. And that discovery can go either direction. It can be the companion app discovering the hub application or the hub application discovering the companion app. There's not really any differentiation. It's not a client-server configuration. Once that discovery takes place, then you have a bidirectional connection where you can send data and invoke actions between the two applications. So you can have a desktop application that uses a mobile app to take a picture, or you can have a mobile application that uses remote control to control the desktop application. App tethering is bidirectional. It's a many-to-many relationship, and it's peer-to-peer. So you can have multiple companion apps. You can have multiple hub applications. You can actually have the hub application, the companion app could be the same application, and they can connect to different instances of the same application. Very powerful, very flexible way of extending your existing applications to new platforms without moving the code, without rewriting things, without porting things, just by adding new functionality that connects via app tethering. Delphi 10 Seattle is also all about more productivity. This is handled through the integrated Castelia IDE enhancements. We've completely integrated Castelia into 10 Seattle. It's no longer separated. There was a few places before where it duplicated some features that were already in 10 Seattle. That's no longer the case. It's very seamlessly integrated now and much more stable. We also have integrated source control, automatic file and project recovery, so that if the power fails or something happens, you're not losing work. IDE Insight is a game changer when it comes to navigation and productivity. I'll tell you a little more about that as well. Visual live bindings is the new way that you can do data binding, where you are connecting data sources to data sets and data controls and everything. It's very, very flexible, very powerful, and very, very quick. You just drag and drop to connect things together. So integrated source control. First of all, we have automatic backups to prevent data loss, like I mentioned. So whatever the case happens, the system dies, something crashes, your data is backed up and saved. We also have multiple revisions to track changes. So each time you save a file, it keeps multiple revisions, and you can go back and compare different revisions with the difference viewer. And then you can take your code and check it into source control. There's support for Git, Mercurial, and Subversion, the three biggest source control systems out there. Right there from the IDE, you can commit your code, Git code, etc. IDE Insight. This is a feature that fundamentally changes the way you work in the IDE. It makes you so much more productive. You just use the keyboard shortcut, either F6 or Control period, to invoke IDE Insight, and you type, and as you type, it filters through this list of everything in the IDE. So everything. It's like the project configuration, the IDE configuration, the component palette, the object inspector, the components on the form, anything, any place you want to go, you can get to through IDE Insight. Used to be, I'm going into project options looking for a particular object and I got to find, I can't remember where it's at in there, and I'm searching for a while. Not anymore. You go to IDE Insight, you type what you're wanting, find it, click, boom, you're right there where you need to be. So much more productive. You don't have to use the mouse. You can do everything you need to do through the keyboard. Very, very productive. It's a game changer for you and really will make you more productive as you get more familiar with it and use it more. 10 Seattle gives you more flexibility. This flexibility comes through support for new input types through multi-touch, interactive gestures, sensors. You can connect to the GPS, the camera, accelerometers, etc., all easily just with a component or a few lines of code. You have the choice between VCL, as we all know and love, or FireMonkey, the cross-platform framework for building applications across Windows, OS X, iOS, and Android. The new FireDAC data access library. FireDAC is phenomenal data access library. It has the robustness, the bidirectional, all the features that we used to have with the BDE, but now it's lightweight, fast, and much more powerful. FireDAC includes great features like in-memory datasets, client client-side SQL. So you can, this is so cool, and I have done a demo with this, but you can actually run and go pull data sets from different data sources. Like, for example, pull a data set down from a REST service, pull a data set from a local interbase database, pull a data set from an Oracle database, pull a data set from a text file, pull a data set from an Excel document, whatever it is, any place you want to get data, you can pull it all into FireDAC. Or let's say you have some third-party library and you're pulling a data set into a data set from that with the third-party library. Once you've done that and you have all these data sets in memory, you can then use FireDAC to execute a join across all these data sets and write local SQL against these data sets. This is phenomenally useful and powerful. There's so many times in the past I've wished I could do this, and FireDAC makes it easy. So FireDAC is the new data access library. If you got a third-party library you're using, that's great. If not, check out FireDAC. It is so amazing. As I alluded to, you have Interbase and SQLite now available as embedded databases. So there's a free Interbase Lite version that you can embed right into your application, or you can get the full-featured version, Interbase to Go, that includes features like encryption, all the features you love about Interbase. But great options for embedding a database into your application. Very flexible. Whatever you want to accomplish, Delphi 10 Seattle makes it that much easier and that much more flexible to find a way to get there. 10 Seattle's great. I'm sure you've already coming up with ideas of things you can do in your application to take advantage of these features in order to make your users happy, add new features, move to new platforms, etc. So let's talk about making migration easier, and I'm going to share a few resources and utilities with you. Instead of me putting a bunch of links up on the screen, I'm just going to go over some of these utilities and features, and then you can get all these links and more at embt.co/webinar-2007-2-10. You can see it right there on the screen. Go there. That's where the replay will be eventually, and also links to all these resources and more. We have done a Unicode migration webinar and have a migration center that just covers everything you need to know about dealing with Unicode. So check that out if you are concerned about Unicode. There is a Unicode statistics tool that is available from there as well that will analyze your code and tell you if you've done some of the things that may end up being issues for migrating to Unicode. And it will help you identify those so that you know what's involved and you know going in what you need to take care of. Most of the time, unless you're using strings for binary storage, the migration is fairly easy, especially now that most all the third parties have moved on and updated their code to Unicode. If you're not sure if your third-party component library has been updated for Unicode, check out the Tech Partner Directory, which, again, there's a link there for that, and go there, find your tech partner, search for them, select 10 Seattle, and it will show you all of everything they've released that supports 10 Seattle, and you'll find all the big ones in there, DevExpress, TMS, etc., have updated their code to work with 10 Seattle so that you can move forward. We also have the TurboPack open source libraries, which is a number of open source libraries. I'll show you a list of those that have been updated to 10 Seattle, and they have resources behind them, some of our MVPs that are working to move those forward and keep those updated. So as new releases come out, you can take advantage of those libraries to move forward. There's a utility I just recently found out about called the Delphi parser, that what it is it analyzes your code and understands your code at a structural level, if you will. And then you can write scripts or use some of the scripts they provide to go through and do some of the migration for your application. So, for example, if you want to change one object to another, one component to another, etc., maybe if it's BDE to FireDAC migration or something like that, it can go through and make all those changes you need to make. Looks very cool. They have a free version and paid version. So check that out. Test the free version, see if it works for you, and it's able to get things done for you. The BDE is no longer installed. It's been deprecated for a while. It doesn't ship as part of 10 Seattle, but it is available as a download. Really, though, you should be taking this chance to move to FireDAC if you're still using the BDE. Most people have quit using the BDE at this point, but if you are, definitely move to FireDAC. But if you need the BDE for some reason or another, it is still available. The MITRE converter makes it easy to convert a VCL application to a FireMonkey application. So if you're wanting to start to move your application from a Windows-centric, Windows-only platform to multi-platform, MITRE converter helps you get there. So here's the list of the open source TurboPack libraries. It's not a complete list. If you go to turbopack.net, you can see the full list of these libraries. Lockbox, Orpheus, a lot of the old TurboPower libraries are in there, as well as a number of other great libraries. All, like I said, all been updated for 10 Seattle. They're quickly updated for future releases as well, and they're available via Git. Git is our new package manager that's built right into the IDE. It contains common open source libraries as well as free third-party libraries and add-in frameworks. Like Jedi, you name it, a lot of the popular stuff is in Git. We're always expanding this, adding new stuff. It's very cool, very exciting. And it makes it really easy to find and install and uninstall libraries. It's so cool. You can just click and say, hey, I need Lockbox. Install, pops up and says, here's license agreement. You agree to it. Boom, 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 boom. It's installed Lockbox. You work with Lockbox. When you're done, you can just click uninstall and it'll uninstall uninstall Lockbox for you, and you can go on. So really, again, a game changer for the way you work with packages and libraries. So Refind is our FireDAC migration utility. It's a command line tool that uses Perl regular expressions to do a smart pattern search and replace on your code. So it includes some migration scripts to move from AnyDAC, BDE, or DB Express to FireDAC. Or you can make your own scripts if you want to be able to go through and parse through your code. So it's kind of similar to what the Delphi parser, which I mentioned earlier, does, but this one's free. This is provided by us. It's different. So take a look at those two utilities. One of those is going to have what you need to do most of the heavy lifting on your code so that you can move forward. So I also want to talk about the adapter pattern. Long ago, like Delphi 7 timeframe, let's say, probably, I was working on a project and they're like, oh, we want to move forward to Delphi 7 from Delphi 3 or whatever it was at the time. But we're using this third-party library that handles zip compression and it's no longer available. We don't have source code for it. What are we going to do? We don't want to change it because it's used everywhere. And I said, let's do an adapter pattern. So an adapter pattern is where you create a class that wraps another class and makes it look like a different class. Okay. So we had this third-party library. I'm pretty sure it was a zip file handler that was, I think it was ActiveX control and OCX, if you remember OCXs from back in the day. And wasn't available. They weren't updating it. It didn't work with the new version of Windows or the new version of Delphi or whatever the case was. So we couldn't use it anymore. The company had gone out of business, disappeared off the face of the planet. So I took the other open source library that was out there. I can't remember which one it was. It may have been Abrevia, and made it work, put an adapter pattern around it so that it looked like the other library. So this meant all of the code didn't change. It just continued working like it did before because it thought it was still using the old library. In the future, we could have, reached in, exposed new features as we needed them or whatever, maybe migrated over time to remove the adapter pattern. But this is a great way if you just cannot find that third-party library, if it's gone or whatever the case may be, to make your application compatible to move forward. So I'm going to do a quick demonstration for you of building a REST client and deploying it to Android and iOS. And this is great. It shows some great productivity, some of the flexibility and connectivity, as well as the reach to new platforms. I have my iPhone 6 Plus running iOS 9.1 and my Nexus 5 running Marshmallow. This here is Sync Timer. It's a little short app, or a little quick small app I wrote in Seattle that uses App Tethering so that when I start it here in Windows, where I'm running the IDE, when I switch back to the OS X host to show it running on my devices, the app running on my devices, you can see the timer stays in sync. Really simple with app tethering. A little timer on there just sends the time back and forth. Let's go ahead and get started. New multi-device application. Now, the service I'm going to connect to is called Spitcast. Spitcast is a surf forecast website that happens to have a REST API. So I'm going to copy that link address here and go into the REST debugger. So the REST debugger lets me prototype this really quick. So I'm going to paste the endpoint in there, connect to it, and then go to the tabular data tab to see that it's pulling the data down, and this is showing it in data step format. So copy these components to the clipboard. The cool thing is this will actually work with a more complicated REST service as well, but this makes for a quick, easy demo. So I'm going to put down something to display this. I'll use a list view, and we'll align the list view to client. Now we're going to use live bindings. Now, in order for the fields to show up in the mem table, I have to execute the REST request. So I'll go over here to REST request, execute. It says 200 OK, and so now we have fields in our FDMem table. So I'm going to connect this to sync to the list view, and I want to be able to preview this without those non-visual components, so let's hide those. And we'll say we want the spot name to show up in the item text, and the county name to show up in the header. Okay, really simple there. So now we do need to write one line of code. So I'm going to go here to the form, go to the create event, and we'll say REST request dot execute. There we go. So now we can quickly prototype this on Windows. REST client. Yes, we'll replace it. And here it is running on Windows. Quick turnaround time. Got it all done here within 2 minutes. So now let's deploy it to Android. All I have to do is change the target to Android. It already sees my Nexus 5. And I'm going to hit compile and run. Now I'm going to speed the video up at this point, just because you don't need to see the actual compilation process. The timer will continue to run, so you know that the time's all good. Although I will point out that the compiler and deployment process seems to run slower when I'm actually using the video recording. So if you run this on your machine, which I encourage you to do, you'll see that it's much, much faster. And there it is running on Android. We're about 3 minutes now, so let's go for iOS. So in order to deploy this on iOS, and just change here to, we'll say 64-bit iOS device, I have to make a change to the deployment. And the reason is in iOS 9, Apple said that you have to connect to an HTTPS service, and if you don't, you have to make a modification to your info plist. And since Spitcast is not using a HTTPS, I have to come in here and add this new one, custom info plist. And I'm just going to add this info plist that I created ahead of time to do that. So you notice as soon as I switched to iOS 64, it connected to my Mac to see my iPhone 6 Plus is connected, which is cleverly named iPhone 6 Plus Plus. And now it's compiling and deploying to my iPhone 6 Plus. Now, while that's doing that, I'll show you. This is the blog post that David and I put together. Explains that Apple required this change and how to modify your info plist. And you can do it for either all arbitrary endpoints or just if you want to do like the app analytics, because it's not using HTTPS yet. So again, I'll go ahead and speed this up so you don't have to watch the whole compile process. And we'll see it as it deploys to the iPhone 6 Plus. Okay, so it took me 5.5 minutes to build and deploy it to both, I guess, 3 platforms. I could do OS 10 as well, but that would just take another second. And so yeah, just over 5 minutes. That includes explaining it. And like I said, the compile seems to take a little bit longer. Maybe it's just I notice it more when I'm recording. But there you go. Built and deployed to both platforms in 5.5 minutes. In summary, we've looked at some of the great business benefits of moving to Delphi 10 Seattle. Your application can have more reach for more markets, more users, more platforms. You have complete connectivity everywhere, anywhere you want to be, and it's only going to get better. Great productivity features, and I really could have gone into more detail on this. There's so much great productivity in here. We've done skill sprints. You can take a look at those that show you some of the productivity enhancements. More flexibility, you have more choices, more options for how you're going to solve the tasks that are presented in your needs for application development so that you can have more sales and more happy customers. So now your boat, you've lost, you can shed your anchors, drop your anchors, get rid of your anchors, just throw them off and sail forward into the future towards 10 Seattle for more sales, more features, more platforms, more markets, and more happy users. And this is what your boat's going to look like when you're done. It's going to be a speedboat, and it's going to be shooting along, skimming across the water, and going places. So now, if you're on live with us, we're going to do live Q&A. Otherwise, we'll have a recording of our Q&A session for everyone else. So there's the link again for the webinar resources at embt.co/webinar-2007-2-10. It's a mouthful to say, but hopefully easier to type. There's my email address, jim.mckeeth, McKeeth, at Embarcadero.com. Shoot me an email if you have any other questions, anything I can do for you. But I'm pretty sure if you check out that link there, you're going to find all the resources you need. And now it's time for Q&A.
Is there a gentle introduction to styles? 2007 has easy checkbox list box, but that's not available in FireMonkey. Making a checkbox list box in FireMonkey. There is, so there, I'm not sure if you've looked at the style editor in 10 Seattle, but it's gotten actually improved over XE7, and it's continuing to get improved. So do take a look at that if you have not yet. But let me see if I can find here.
There's also
some resources on styles.
Code Rage sessions and skill sprints on using styles, and I'm putting in links in the Q&A log if I can copy and paste properly to two DocWiki.
Oh, excellent.
To two DocWiki entries. One of the things it depends on if you're talking about FireMonkey. Anything can contain anything. So all you do is if you drop like a list box down or a list view, and you, or in particular a list box, and you just put your checkbox under the list box item. Once you create a list box item, that checklist, that checkbox will be in that list box item, and you can align it right, align it left. We did different examples of that. I'll find several of the replay videos, but I posted in using styles because there was you mentioned styles. So I put in the DocWiki links about how you use FireMonkey and styles and VCL and styles. The next thing is building up composite components. And I wasn't sure, again, whether you wanted a checkbox within a list box item. In FireMonkey, it's very easy to do. In VCL, it's not specifically possible without I think some lower level coding, getting Windows handles and doing some stuff, but I'll have to think about that one. But for FireMonkey, it's easy. Drop a list box down, create a list box item, get a checkbox, and just drag it into the list box item in the structure window when you're in the form designer. Or you can do it in code as well. You can just parent the checkbox. You can actually put a form inside of a list box item in FireMonkey. I'm not sure you want to do that, but you can parent anything to anything. You can put a form inside of a button in FireMonkey. You can have a form inside of a form in FireMonkey. So with form embedding, you have to do that in code. The designer doesn't let you drag a form into another form. But you can absolutely do it in code just by setting the parent property of a form to another form instance.
I'm putting a link in here too for the VCL Developer's Guide to FireMonkey by Robert Love, which is a Code Rage session. And he kind of goes through a lot of just some of the fundamental differences, talking about, like David, I just said, that you can embed anything. So that's a great resource if you're new to FireMonkey and want to understand it better. So there's a question here, if there is any webinar or document covering an easy way to convert old Midas remote provider-based applications to the new DataSnap REST approach.
Yeah, there was a talk by, oh boy, there was a talk and an article or blog post. I'll find that one as well. It was sort of a, I think it was 8 or 9 step process for taking a Midas COM-based application and moving it to DataSnap. So I will find that that entry. I was just still back on the list box, but let me find that one as well. Go ahead, Jim.
That resources page that's there, though, is got most of those links, and I'll add the rest of these links to there as well. And I also have a few more that I have not put up there yet. So that's a great place to start. One thing I will point out, and this is a fairly new, or newer tool, is the Delphi parser. So what the Delphi parser does, and I mentioned this briefly in the video. Actually, I was going to put do a sample with it, but it wasn't able to for time. Is that you point it to your project, and then it goes through and scans your project, your legacy project, and understands it at a code level, both the DFM and the Delphi code, or C++ if you're a C++ developer. And then once it does that, you can then apply a script to it that will take that code and go through and make changes to it to change, for example, it has a sample script that comes with it for moving from BDE to FireDAC. So it's expandable. They have different levels with different levels of source code, stuff like that, and you can do quite a bit with it. It looks like it looks very cool, very powerful. I'm excited to see some of the additional features they add with that as time goes by. So check that out. And I talked to Oren. He's one of the lead developers behind it. I had a chat with him as well, and he seems very eager to help people move forward. So if there is something that you need it to do that it's not doing yet, certainly let Oren know, and hopefully he can put that in there for you. It could really do. One of the things that's an interesting idea, actually, he talked about was the idea that, and this is something I've been on before, where if you have a code base and you need to move it to 10 Seattle, move it to Unicode, migrate it, whether you're going from BD to FireDAC or any component system that you're changing out. One of the problems that happens is you end up usually forking your code, and you're like, oh, well, let's create a branch, and this branch has got the new development for all the new features we have to have going forward anyway, right? Because you can't stop development. I mean, that's just always got to keep. You always got to keep adding new features. And another branch then has your conversion or your migrations in it. And so oftentimes what happens is if the migration takes a while, then all of a sudden these branches are too far apart, and merging them back together becomes a pain. So it's a mess. So one of the things that's great about using a utility like the Delphi parser or even Refind is that you can you don't have to branch. You use Refind or Delphi parser, which I guess you could say Delphi parser is kind of like Refind's big brother, if you will, and point it to your code base, your current code base. Go out, check out your current code base from source control, run it, and look at the results. See if what it's done, see what it missed, see what stuff still needs to be done, then make the changes to the scripts to do a better job next time. Okay? And so the next day, you run it again, and if it's got a huge project, you can just run it overnight, whatever you need to do. Next morning, check it, what's left to be converted. And so you just keep tweaking and improving those conversion scripts, and then as soon as you're ready, you can take the latest code from source control, run it through Refind or Delphi parser, and you have your migration 90% of the way done, or a big portion of the way done, so that at that point you can then say, okay, let's commit this in there, make the last few little bits of changes, and you don't have this problem with the two branches that are diverging in the woods. So very cool strategy for migrating, and a couple of great utilities out there.
So I'll find the 9-step process. It was written originally by Dan Miser, and I'll get that to Jim to put in the blog post for the webinar. So there is Dan Miser. I'll type it. Wrote a 9-step process. It was manual. Will and give, and we'll post it on Jim on the blog. Okay. Just having trouble finding that at the moment. For rave reports, somebody who's saying has a lot of reports. Fast reports is bundled, and I thought there was a rave converter.
So if I remember correctly, Report Builder has a rave converter. They have converters for a number of different ones as well. I'm pretty sure it's Report Builder that does. I was just looking for that. But Nevrona has an updated version of rave reports that supports Rad Studio 10 Seattle. So that's another option. Is it may not be bundled, but you can certainly go to Nevrona's website, and I'll put the link in here for it.
So here, and I'm putting the link into the. I put the link to the Fast Report Rave converter. They have a blog post, how to convert a .rav file. I have to look at Nevrona because they dropped off the world for a while.
No, it looks like I'm on their site right now, and it says current release as of 9/2015 supports Rad Studio 10 Seattle.
Okay. So then 2 ways. Go to Nevrona.com. Okay. Or if you're thinking about fast reports, then I put the link to the blog post about how to migrate. Graphics 32. And then he's talking about the slow on OS 10. So Michael, why don't you send Jim and I an email? I'd like to understand more about what you're doing with graphics, if it's FireMonkey related, what you're doing. There were some changes and optimizations in FireMonkey. In some of the earlier versions of FireMonkey, for graphics operations with the GPU, we had the bitmaps in memory, and then we were pushing them up to the GPU and then getting them back again, and that was there was slowness involved. The more recent versions of FireMonkey push bitmaps and effects animations, all those things, into the GPU, and they stay in there, and it's only if you need to get something back into your code, maybe to store a bitmap or a form image or whatever it might be, the canvas, in some other data structure. But FMX now does everything in the GPU memory. And I forget since which version, whether that was XE8 or it wasn't in 10 Seattle, so it was either XE8 or earlier for higher speed. So we did that optimization along the way, but it may be specific to what you might be doing with FireMonkey on Windows and OS 10 or on OS 10. On OS 10, we use OpenGL under the covers. On Windows, we use DirectX. And then on iOS and Android, we use OpenGL ES for the graphics processing. But ultimately, it's all pushed up to the GPU under the covers by FireMonkey. So Ray's components and the Kanopka components, same names, same features. So if you have the Kanopka components, the only difference was there's 10 Seattle versions for the Kanopka components that come from us. They're for sale separately. They're also in the RAD solution pack if you want to buy a whole set of components bundled together. They're 10 Seattle. And I don't believe there were any changes in classes. I don't know.
Yeah, I think there were, yeah, exactly, just straight across.
Yeah.
It wasn't renamed. So Miguel pointed out that if you do create something, if you are in something 2000, Delphi 2009 or newer, so a Unicode version of Delphi, that your applications won't work on Windows 95, Windows 98, or ME because it wasn't until XP that Unicode was added to the OS. That's true. Forget about those older versions of the OS, just haven't seen, they're not around very much anymore, but I suppose there probably are some people out there that are still running those. And I remember after XP came out, a lot of websites that had software available for download would have, hey, here's the old non-Unicode version and here's the Unicode version. So, that was when the OS made that transition from ANSI strings to Unicode strings at Windows XP, the software had to move with it. And so, yeah, if you want to continue to support some users on Windows 95, leave your old version of your software available for them to download, and then at some point they will upgrade to Windows XP or newer, and they can take advantage of your new Unicode version of your software. So.
And Jim, you did a lot of stuff with .NET in your past, and of course I did Delphi.NET when we had it. James is asking about advice. They've got some Delphi.NET code, and if you could, and my advice is you can put that Delphi.NET code, if you can put it into an assembly. An assembly is just a DLL, right? And then you can call it from a Delphi VCL app call into the entry points. Anything to really add for James? Question came in at 6.
Yeah, I see that. So really you can, exactly like David said, you can leverage that from a Tensile application. Now, if you're trying to move away from Delphi for .NET and make it into a, maintain it with a newer compiler, whether it be whatever it might be, I'm not aware of any utilities for migrating from Delphi for .NET to other languages, because, like you said, pointed out, if you're using VCL for .NET, etc., then it's not really available anywhere else anyway. So it depends on what you're trying to do. If you're wanting to do a wholesale migration, yeah, so Delphi for .NET had some compatibility with regular Delphi, so you may be able to go back to regular Delphi, but if you're leveraging leveraging features of the .NET framework that aren't available in Delphi or don't map directly, then you'd have to go through those parts and change them over. So it really depends on your project. The alternative, though, like David said, is keep those as assemblies, just use them as assemblies, invoke them that way, and then that will let you move forward with the rest of your development with Tensile, and then later, when it becomes necessary, you can go back and just gradually replace parts of that with code that's been updated to work with Tensile directly and not go through .NET later. So just do like a piecemeal approach to breaking off pieces that you need to be replaced with Tensile. So hopefully that answers your question, James. I know that can be kind of complicated sometimes when you're moving across platforms like that.
And all I said was, hey, if you want to give me a little bit of code, I can try it. If you don't have Tensile, I can try to see what it would take steps-wise to convert the code. I mean, at the Delphi language level, it's mostly the same, but it depends on what the code is doing. If it's business logic, that's one thing. If it's UI and such, then, or if it's calling into .NET other specific things, then you've got to figure out the Windows equivalents at a higher level than .NET.
Yeah, if it's using VCL for .NET and the RTL, that it should probably switch over to Tensile. Pretty straightforward. But if it's if the reason you did it in Delphi for .NET is because you wanted to leverage some specific thing in .NET, whether it be a third-party library or whatever. Now, if it's a third-party library, There are a couple frameworks out there that make it easy to leverage third-party libraries, .NET libraries from Delphi, and then, or you can just invoke it as a COM object as well. So, which is pretty straightforward.
Yeah.
So, yeah, there's a few ways to move that around. It just depends on what you're doing.
Yeah, I did, as far as the COM to data snap, there was a talk at an early Code Rage for doing that by John Robertson of JMR Software. The link is broken to the old article, but I have all of those videos, so I will resurrect the video from our archives, put it on YouTube, and Jim, I'll give you the link. And it was migrating DCOM data snap applications to the DB Express space, or really just the common new data snap now versus the DCOM. So that was a talk of like Code Rage 3, 4, something like that. But I'll resurrect it, put it on YouTube, and give you the link, Jim, to put into.
Excellent. Yeah.
Resources.
I was actually looking for that resource, so that's great. Thank you.
It points to a broken link from the old EDN article, but since I know the talk and who gave it, I've got all the Code Rage going back to Code Rage 1. So I'll get that one put up on YouTube today and give you the link. Is there a version of GL Scene components for 10 Seattle? So not directly. There were, when we acquired the technologies from Eugene, from KSDev, where there was different versions, DL Scene, GL Scene, and so on, some of those underpinnings are very similar. We did not bring some of those things forward. There are other OpenGL libraries that some people have played with. Again, FireMonkey has some of those same notions, but of course has evolved over the last 5 or 6 architectural releases of revisions and advancements of FireMonkey. So we did not bring any of those component sets for Delphi forward because we created FireMonkey. So I mean, for doing all of the FireMonkey-based operations, it's FireMonkey. As far as Delphi, Jim, maybe we'll have to find, there are different bindings for Delphi for OpenGL that are out there. And there was DirectX in the past as well, and we still support DirectX. So going to have to do a little more investigation to add some links if you want to go direct to OpenGL versus migrating your code with Meta Converter from VCL to FireMonkey. So yeah, if it's straight graphics you're trying to do with DirectX and with OpenGL, then we need to give you some resources for that. Okay, and then a request for an article about using T-bytes as opposed to ANSI strings. Okay. All right, great suggestion.
Yeah.
Yep.
John's asking what happened to T-image. Not sure, John. It's still there. So I'm not sure if you're not seeing it, maybe you need to load a package, or if it's different. So let us know what it is you're maybe looking for there with T-image, and we'll see if we can help you. Alf is asking about the difference, said that Apple versus Windows use a different byte order for UTF-16 encoding. Windows uses Little Endian, whereas Apple uses Big Endian, and wanting to know if Seattle supports reading those different text files. That's the purpose of the T-encoding class. If you use the T-encoding, it looks at the byte order mark, the BOM at the very beginning of the file, to determine if it's Little Endian or Big Endian or UTF-8, and then is able to read it incorrectly. So anytime you need to read things that are in different byte orders or any different types of encodings. You can use that. It actually supports other encodings as well besides those 3 Unicode ones. So take a look at the T encoding class, and you can read other sorts of files in. Alan's asking if there's plans to make the RSA PC1 encryption option available without using OpenSSL. So we don't currently have that, but it's something they're looking into. There's other ways of doing encoding as well and encrypting. David's put a couple of links in here, a few links in here into the chat window, so take a look at those. But yeah, there's something they're looking at expanding more in the future, for sure. So there's a question here about specifically doing migrations. So I was going to show more migrations, and then I realized there's just everybody that responded to our survey had a different concern of what they're trying to do in migrating. So that's why I compiled the set of links that are available there at the blog post that covers different migration scenarios. Lots of great utilities out there, lots of great guides. And hopefully, you know, I could have spent an hour just talking about Unicode migration or just talking about FireDAC migration, for example, BDE to FireDAC, and it would have ostracized everybody else. So take a look at those resources. There are lots of great information, hopefully helpful. If you are still stuck, though, let us know, and maybe we can help connect you with an MVP or a consulting partner that focuses on migration. There's a lot of our partners, consulting partners, MVPs out there who help people with migrations. So there's lots of people out there that are available to help you, depending on where you're located at, if you're working with someone remotely, etc. And so yeah, lots of options available there. Does the IDE still have the brief command option? Let me look and see. I'm going to use IDE inside BRIEF. Brief regular expressions and brief cursor. So under edit options in the IDE, you have the option turn on brief regular expressions. I think as soon as I can remember, there's like a brief shortcut keys. I think that's probably what you're talking about, John. I don't see that in here. Brief command option. Yeah, so it supports brief regular expressions still. Let's see.
There's key mapping. So if you go under tool
key mapping
options, editor options, key mappings, there's IDE Classic, Brief Emulation, Epsilon Emulation, Visual Studio Emulation, Visual Basic Emulation, new IDE Classic, and new IDE Emacs. So there's your...
Yep, exactly, yep.
So just go under Tools, Options. You can make it global to the IDE. I don't know if there's a command line option, but there is, again, Tools, Options. We'll set it for your whole environment. It's under the editor.
So, yes, John, it does have that still available.
Back here, Tools.
So, Alf, as far as what all T encoding supports, take a look at the DocWiki page for it. That's there in the chat window, and you can go read the documentation on it. I'm not sure all the encodings it supports, but you can take a look at those and see. And if not, you can. If the DocWiki doesn't say for sure, take a look at the source code for it. And yeah, I'm not sure. I'm not even familiar with Ansel encoding. It probably doesn't support EBCDIC either, or maybe it does. I don't know. There are lots of encodings out there, and it most likely doesn't support all of them, but hopefully it supports most of them. John saying T-image is in VCL but not in FireMonkey.
It's there.
Let me look.
I did it. I created a new multi-device application, went to the component palette, typed T-image, and dropped it on my form, and then I went to the object inspector and loaded a picture in it, a bitmap in it. Sorry, it's absolutely there.
Yeah, so John, if you're not seeing it, you may need to go into your package manager and make sure you have all your packages loaded that are related to FireMonkey components. If you've unloaded some packages, that could prevent the component from being installed. It's the only thing I can think of, because yeah, just going to say I'm pretty sure it's there. Actually, I did a skill sprint using it a couple weeks ago.
It's there. It's absolutely there. In 10 Seattle. I mean, when you create a multi-device app. Absolutely. But
can I migrate from IBX to FireDAC? Yes, you can. I'm trying to think, do we have a guide that covers that particular scenario?
which one is it, Jim? I'm sorry.
IBX to FireDAC?
No, we don't do IBX to FireDAC. The only converter you can migrate. You'd have to do you just one for one. There's two parts. I should slow down. Okay. There is a BDE migration script for Delphi that'll convert BDE, T-table, T-query, and some of the code, and it gives you notes about other code to explore to FireDAC. For IBX, there's two parts. IBX has obviously the connection, the query, the table, the store procedure components, but it has a whole range of other IBX components that are specific to the Interbase API. That's what makes IBX such a great thing to use on all four platforms that we support with FireMonkey and on Windows with VCL or console apps and so on. So if you're just using the connection, the query, the table, and the store procedure, basically just one-for-one replace with FT connection, FT query, FT table, and so on, transactions and such. For some of the other API ones, some of that FireDAC will do under the covers for certain things if you set certain options like fetch options like unidirectional. So in FireDAC, unidirectional is under the fetch options. It's a sub-property versus with IBX table and query, it's a top-level property. But you can move your applications. Again, the question is how much of the Interbase-specific API are you using, and then the mapping that to maybe some options that FireDAC might have. Beyond that, and the only way to know is to go back to the samples folder. I'm sorry to jump in on you, Jim. I apologize. Let's go.
No, this is good. I appreciate it.
Base, FireDAC, tool, refined. There is BDE to FireDAC, DBX to FireDAC, and then previous versions of AnyDAC. There's an AnyDAC to FireDAC. So there isn't an IBX. There is a DB Express and BDE to FireDAC migration script. These all use the refined tool. You can find those in the samples, Object Pascal, database, FireDAC tool subfolder. So it's a one-for-one. We don't have an automated tool that does it, Alberto, but mostly one-for-one. No script to do it. Might be a great one for somebody to do. Jim, you had talked about the Delphi parser, which does some migration of something.
So the Delphi parser,
but
it's similar to refined, but it's a little more complex maybe. It's able to do some more things, I believe, than refined is. It currently has a script for BDE to FireDAC migration, but you could modify that script to do IBX, where it's like you said, it's a one-for-one, and it could do that for you. It could be capable of doing some more complex things as well.
What I'll do is I'm making a note to myself to see if I can do a blog post that talks about some guidance for IBX to FireDAC. But really, IBX, I've done webinars recently. IBX Interbase Express works on VCL projects, Windows, OS X, iOS, and Android projects as well. So you don't have to move from IBX to FireDAC if you don't want to. And you can even use the FireDAC FD mem table because you can take a data set that comes from IBX through a data source and put it in an FDMM table and then save it locally and so on. But if you send me an email, davidi@embarcadero.com, and also Aiden, Skype, I'm davidi99 on Skype. So I will try to help you or guide you. I'm not a consultant to do source code project conversion. At the same time, I'm always interested in looking at any pre-Unicode Delphi projects, if you want to share the source with me, to run them through some of these tools and load them into Delphi 10 Seattle and see how fast we can move stuff. One of the things, Jim has all the links to some of the tools that are out there, including Anders Olsen's scanning program that looks at all of the keywords. It's a variation on Jacob Thurman's parser, and he looks for all of the keywords and function call methods that can have Unicode implications, like where you use char, pchar, PNC string, all of those kinds of things, and it dumps it out when you have a set of character. So that's one way. It gives you the files and source code lines that you should investigate that are pre-Unicode. The other thing we always told everyone back in the Delphi 2009 release and beyond is that we put all these additional errors and warnings in the compiler options that are turned on that give you warnings and or errors, and you can change the severity level from a warning to an error. For example, if you're using automated build systems, that would give you a warning to tell you, for example, you should use the char in set method function when you're looking for, character strings, specific characters inside of a string. Right, so we always did that is we'd say, name of the string when it was an ANSI string and it was byte for byte, character for character. We'd say, is one of those characters from a set of characters in a string using the in operator. And so now from 2009 and beyond, we tell you we provided a function called char in set where you specify the string variable and you specify the characters, and it handles whether they're Unicode strings or not. So there's things like that just copying your project over, running it through 10 Seattle or any version post the Unicode change for string, and see what errors and warnings come up, and then go and fix them. You can always do on Windows. You can always change string to ANSI string and change char to ANSI char and so on. But that won't help you necessarily if you want to get to mobile application platforms and so on. But yeah, it's just if you want to ping me about a specific option. For example, what linker settings get you executables instead of having to deploy BPLs. I put the link in the doc wiki to that that tells you how to build with runtime packages or not in the Delphi compiler. In the C++ compiler, there's a couple settings you need to make. The default in Delphi was to always build using runtime packages, then you deployed the additional BPLs that are needed. But you can turn that option off. In C++, the default, I think, if I remember correctly, is, I always have to remind myself, is to not build with dynamic packages, and it builds it into the executable. So, and you can create option sets for your projects when you want to do one or the other. So you don't have to change the global project settings. You can create a project options option set file .optset if you want for certain projects to override your sort of global project settings that you do under tools options for any project that you might have. And so char in set can do all sorts of stuff. So to answer you, I'll look at char in set. Go to the docwiki.embarcadero.com/Seattle/en and search for char in set. Okay. Use the doc wiki. Okay. Yeah, and you can usually tell if your Delphi executables are large or larger that you have the right settings. You're saying you're getting prompted to have the BPLs as well. There is a way, there is another option that's in the project options where you can specify the names of BPLs that you want to have as BPLs. So take a look at that option. It's usually like VCL semicolon, I forget the other ones. So if you don't want those, if you want those linked in, I think you need to look at the doc wiki. You need to clear out that sort of known BPLs that maybe are kept around or that you already have on your machines. So there's two ways. There's the option to build or not build with runtime packages, and then there's another setting I think was a parameter string that's separated by semicolon files that you want BPLs to absolutely not be linked in. I think that's the way it works. But it's all again in the doc wiki. I'll find that other specific project option. Okay. Okie dokie. And then again, we're looking for samples. So if you have some Delphi 7 or 2007 samples that you want to have us take a look at and help you think about the strategies for migrating forward, send us an email. I'd love to record doing some of that work if it's okay. A lot of companies don't want to share their source code with us because it's proprietary, secret, or whatever. Kerry Jensen, and I think I gave Jim the link, that did a RAD in action a couple years ago back in the Unicode transition days where and there's a white paper. What he did was we did a survey out to customers, and he talked with them further to create a whole white paper on strategies and best practices that people used in moving their applications to Delphi 2009, which is the Unicode. I call it the Unicode chasm, like Geoffrey Moore's crossing the chasm, in technology areas, for example, platforms. So Jim either has or will have the link to the Kerry Jensen RAD in action, and if you go to that page or just search Kerry Jensen RAD in action on Google, then there's you can register and download that white paper where he collected all those best practices for migrating across Unicode. And it's a really good white paper based on real feedback from real developers, as opposed to those imaginary developers that we all know and love. Okay. What did we miss?
So the question here about the XML data binding wizard, if it supports import and include statements in XSD files.
Oh.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I haven't looked at that in a while.
I haven't looked at that since a long time ago. So we'll have to get back to you on that. I'll save the Q&A log. From 6 a.m. I already sent a couple emails with follow-up emails and copied Jim on one of them so that if we find it, Jim could put it as another resource in his blog post about the webinar. Let's see about that. Generating classes for connecting to DataSnap. Well, that was in the days, the DB Express, since DataSnap originally was sitting over the top of DBX, we still have some of we still use some of the name scope for DBX, even though there's no DCOM anymore as it relates to DataSnap. And DataSnap really is on its own world. Let's try that. Let's create new. Go ahead with some other ones, Jim. I'm going to go file new, bring up the DataSnap wizard, and.
So I see that you said you occasionally have your license gets corrupted. What you can do is you can back up your local license. I had someone else that had the same problem, and they're like, "That's all the time. It keeps getting corrupted," and it turned out actually their hard drive was failing, and they were getting random data corruption. But they were always in Delphi, so that's where they noticed it. So make sure you have a good backup. If you do get corruption, you can restore local backup of the license. Yeah, I think if I remember correctly, you can back it up from the license manager. If not, just back up the files directly. And check to make sure that your hard drive is in good shape.
Yeah, I don't.
And then, yeah, if you want to do a migration, that would be great. Yeah, follow up with David I on that, and we're definitely looking for people that can do that. The problem with tab stop in FireMonkey Android applications. What is happening with what's going on with your tab stops? If you could elaborate on that, that'd be great. It said that you're having trouble with anchors.
Okay, I mean anchors work. Is he talking about?
Yeah.
Yeah, no anchor. Yes.
So there was prior to Update 1 in Seattle, there was occasionally some sort of scenario, I'm not sure exactly what it was, that caused the anchors to kind of cause things to get really stretched out. But that was fixed, should be fixed in Update 1, because I actually had that problem, and couldn't figure. I don't know what the scenario was, because sometimes they did it, sometimes they didn't. But when I submitted a ticket and they fixed it in Update 1, and I went through and tested the places I saw it, and it was fixed. So make sure you're running Update 1, and that should fix any kind of anchor issues you might be having. So Alan's saying he's having some the file recovery features confusing. If you were working and things happen and you lost things got shut down before you saved, and it comes back up and prompts you, then if you want to recover them, say yes. Otherwise, say no. If it continues to prompt you after the fact, which I saw someone said that happened, then somehow I think their files got marked read-only, and so the IDE couldn't clean up afterwards, or something like that. So, where was that at? Let me look so I can find that real quick.
I'm getting an echo when you're talking right now, so I don't think it's me because I was on mute. Anyway, I'm going to put in the auto recover doc wiki. You can choose to okay. You can choose to, according to the doc wiki. I'll have to try it myself. You can choose to double-click on any of the files that you want to recover. It gives you a list of files that are recoverable. So you can double-click on each of the files you want to recover, and then close the recovery window. Proceed with saving your files as required. If you close a file recovery and say you want to recover files later, that's fine. If you click yes, then it will recover the ones you select and not recover the ones that you choose not to select. Anyway, I sent you the link. And you also can set the period of time to do the save interval. The IDE will save all the open files that you have currently open for recovery. So double-click, either recover all of them or none of them, or just the ones that you double-click to select to recover. Okay. We're now into the questions that weren't necessarily related to migration, but
yeah, it's top of the hour too.
Yep. Okay. Oh, I see. Saying the screen should say double-click. We'll pass that along to the IDE team. Because I guess you're right. It's not that obvious other than reading the documentation. And there's no little checkbox where you could check them or something. So we'll pass that along. Oh, actually, go into quality.embarcadero.com, Alan, and enter a JIRA entry, feature request, to have the auto recovery window have some explanatory text. That would help me, 'cause otherwise I've got to go and do it myself, because there's no difference between you doing it and me other than you asked for the request. But I'll pass along. But we really do use the quality.embarcadero.com request. Okay. When you see things like that, when we see things that you think should have a feature, have an additional option, should be different, not necessarily a bug, just a design choice, put those in quality.embarcadero.com. Get people to vote for them besides yourself. And Marco looks through them. Marco and Serena look through all the feature requests, and the team looks through all the bug reports. But feature requests are good as well. Oh, they're in denial. And just to note, Jim has put the URL to the landing page for the webinar where he's got lots of great resource links. He's put that in the chat window, so you can click on that link and get to the landing page, which I think, Jim, is the second tab on the browser there. There you go.
Yep.
So lots of resource links there to articles and tools and videos and everything. So definitely check that out in addition to the work that you need to do on your own projects. And if you have some projects that you're migrating or planning to migrate, keep us updated on your progress. If there's some tips that you need or help, we can send you notes, links. Carrie Jensen did a great session on the RAD in Action probably a couple of years ago, 3 years ago, maybe back in the 2009-2010 era, where Carrie did a survey and gathered a lot of best practices from people who were migrating their projects from 2007 to 2009, and he collected all of those together. That's the stories and advice from the front lines white paper that he did that Jim was pointing to there. It's got a lot of great feedback from developers about what they did to move their projects forward, and it's a great resource for you to leverage. We're always looking for people who've migrated projects forward from older versions, Delphi 7 up to 2007, so that we can gather additional best practices as you're going through that. If we can help you or look at some of the source code that you're focused on or having trouble with, then maybe we can share a screen or whatever and add that to our repository of the migration. So if you've already done it, tell us what was easy and tell us what was hard. Let's see, migrating big project, 2 apps with 700 DLLs. So we're switching to a BPL. Well, you can have DLLs. I mean, we still support DLLs, 32-bit DLLs and 64-bit DLLs on Windows. So if you want to just leave them the way they are, that's fine. They have interfaces that can be called. Or you could decide, I mean, a BPL is a DLL. The difference is it can be linked in to the executable. That's a compiler choice. Or you can leave them as external runtime packages that you would just carry around, just as you would carry around a DLL. So it's, in a sense, your choice. You get the benefit if you make it a BPL. Again, that static linking ability versus the runtime. And but yeah, take the code that's in your DLL and create a new unit and put the interfaces you want in the interface section and put the code in the implementation section and create a BPL.
Yeah, I was going to add that with one advantage for BPLs is because they can share the same memory, so you're able to share objects through from a BPL in the main app. So that's one advantage of BPLs. It seems like I remember there's a way to do it with DLLs, but it was kind of a pain. Essentially, you make your DLL into a BPL, but it's still called DLL or something like that. But yeah, that's the other main difference.
And there were tools, I know we had articles way back when, where you could link a DLL, in a sense, inside of your executable, but still call it like it was a DLL. There were articles back in the day about those kinds of operations as well. But BAPL definitely gets you additional advantages.
Okay, well, I think we may not have any more questions.
So thank you, everybody. Thank you, Jim.
Absolutely. Thanks, everyone, for joining us. And be sure you bookmark that the blog post and check back, because I'm adding more resources to that as well, based on questions that came up earlier and some other things. So check back there, and there'll be more resources and the replay as well.